Welcome Acting Sergeant Stephen Smith, and thank you to all our members joining us today from across Australia for this Business Boost live webinar on retail crime prevention strategies for a safer small business environment. We've got half an hour. If you've got any questions at all during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section that you'll see a button for below, and we'll try to answer as many of these as we can further on in the webinar. As small business owners and operators, we face numerous challenges in maintaining a safe and secure business environment. I know lots of members are interested in these issues, and today we've got Acting Sergeant Stephen Smith from the Queensland Police Crime Prevention Unit with us to share his invaluable insights to help you enhance your security measures and procedures. So welcome, Stephen. We really appreciate you making the time to join us. And while we'll be approaching this discussion from a best practice perspective that will benefit, all members, it's just important to note that that Steve is speaking specifically about Queensland legislation and practices during this webinar. Many of the themes we'll cover today are broadly applicable to all of your businesses, but we encourage members from other states and territories to consult with their local community policing or crime prevention units about any differences in laws or procedures specific to your jurisdictions. Now let's dive into our discussion and explore strategies for creating a safer retail environment. So starting with the basics, Steve, what are some of the most common signs or behaviours that retail staff should be trained to look out for when it comes to potential shoplifters or thieves, I guess, in retail stores?
It's a great question. If I could just acknowledge firstly, thank you so much for the invitation to join in, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone. Sounds like a really simple question that you've just asked me, but in fact, I think there are some complexities to it because offenders behave very differently. They behave very differently depending on the amount of experience they've had offending, the location where they may be offending, what they're targeting, the number of staff that may be there, the number of security or police that might be nearby, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some generalised issues that I think your members should be aware of, and to be fair, most of them very much would be aware of these things. I don't think I'll be sharing new information with them. But what you would be looking for people entering your store, or even in behaviours surrounding your stores, it doesn't have to be inside, it could be in the immediate area around your stores. You could be looking for nervous behaviours like visible signs of anxiousness, or maybe they're showing a lot of interest in observing others around them, rather than paying attention to the stock that could be in their near vicinity. Unusual clothing is always something that will strike the eye. It could be the middle of summer and 40 degrees plus, and someone's coming in with a large jumper and track pants and a big hat. Large pockets in board shorts. Unusually in Mackay here where I'm based, we've begun to see a bit of a trend of objects like prams also being used to conceal items for theft. Sometimes in empty prams, sometimes underneath babies.
Wow.
Yeah. So customers frequently returning to a store, although apparently with no obvious purpose. So in those types of circumstances, you might think that they're looking for opportunities to steal. Maybe they're getting an idea on the lay of the land, on what is where. Maybe they're trying to case out how many staff are available and get some understanding of your routines. We are beginning to see more commonly people working together. So multiple customers entering a shop, all with the same intent. It might be that one person is doing the actual stealing and the others work to physically block you from seeing that theft occurring, or, as I'm sure all of your members are aware, it could be the case that the other people may be involved in distracting the staff that are present, meaning that they can't watch the person steal who's actually doing it. Deliberately moving to areas of the business where they are less visible from you, hiding behind shelves, behind walls, behind pillars, in unusual areas. We had an incident recently where we had a phone call about suspicious behaviours of one person who entered the store, a man who was hiding behind a pillar in the area where they were selling women's clothing. And that caught the attention of the staff member that was working, because he wasn't handling clothes, he wasn't looking for a present, he would just be out of sight behind the wall for a short period of time. And as it turns out, her suspicions were justified. He had some stolen items concealed on his person. Another obvious factor could be that they're highly observant of staff movements. So it is impossible, I acknowledge, for employees to be able to keep an eye on every person that's in their store, as well as managing the business, cleaning the stock, cleaning the floors, keeping the shelves right, doing computer work, doing all those other chores. It's impossible to be on top of everything. And you will be watched by these people for those opportunities when you are distracted. We do add that you approach these circumstances with some care. It is possible sometimes that we make mistakes and mischaracterize some behaviours, and we need to be aware that you sometimes need more than just a suspicion before you act.
No, that's really, really good. And that probably brings me to my next question, which is, some of our retailers, I guess, out of frustration, they might be tempted to take matters into their own hands when dealing with shoplifters or, being suspicious about a customer in store, and want to do things such as search bags or, chase a suspect who leaves the store rapidly. Can you talk to us about, I suppose clearly outline the do's and don'ts when dealing with suspected shoplifters to ensure our members stay within their legal boundaries?
Yeah, I sure can. Yeah, and I totally get the frustration that your members must be feeling when these incidents are happening. However, there are some important do's and don'ts that they should be aware of, and I'll start off with the do's. Do communicate with your staff so that they are aware of your expectations of business owner or manager of what you would like them to do in different circumstances. For example, what's expected of the staff if they were to actually cite a person who they think has been engaging in shop stealing? What do you expect of them if they're speaking with a witness to shop stealing occur? What would you like them to do? Or what if they actually identify after the event, after people have been in the store, that items have been stolen? It's important that they understand what their expectations are. Do have a policy in place for dealing with suspected shoplifting that complies with legal guidelines. It's tricky for me to give specific advice here because there will be a lot of people tuning in from different locations, different states where there's different rules, different legislations, policies, et cetera, et cetera. But I work in crime prevention in Queensland, so I'm allocated to a district which is a large area of police divisions, and I'm responsible for ensuring that there is a working relationship with business owners. So if you are looking for, in Queensland, someone who you could reach out to within the Queensland Police Service who could give you advice, give you instruction, maybe even give you a kit, I think that's something we spoke about earlier on that could help you and your staff understand more closely the specifics. That's our job. And I'm sure that there are other roles in police services around the country that are very similar. Do have contact numbers visible and available for staff so that when something happens and they know what you want them to do, the contact numbers for the people that need to know are handy, close by, visible, easy to find, easy to use. For example, your business may be situated inside of a large shopping complex. You might have access to security officers or even what we refer to as a police beat in a shopping centre in Queensland. They could be close. So it's typical in those situations that businesses in the complex actually have mobile numbers for security officers, police officers, etc. So they should be close by, or even the centre management. But if you're not in that type of situation, maybe staff need to know managers' contact details, police station contact numbers, or even something like Police Link where you can report non-urgent crimes. So those numbers need to be available. Act professionally and remain calm. That sounds so easy when you say it out loud, and I apologise for that because it's really not. It comes with experience, it comes with practice, it comes with conversations with your staff, and it comes over time. And if you have young staff members that work for you, it's really good to have those conversations away from business and talk about the way you might be able to handle a situation where it might be possible to lose control of your emotions and say things and do things that might not be professional. It's also important to, aside from that, when you see good behaviour happening or good actions or good responses from your staff, point that out to them as well. Give them that positive feedback. Do understand the condition of entry boundaries. And by that, I mean knowing what you can do and what you cannot do and not going beyond those means. So can you, this is a question, and most of you will know that, can you lawfully stop and search a person that enters your store? Or can you just ask a person to show you what's in their bag? What if they don't? You know, what if they don't want to show you what's in their bag and they just want to get outside? Do you know that confidently? And can you give advice to your staff on a situation like that confidently? And if it's the case that you don't think you can, again, police resources, we're there to help, and we could certainly help you with that type of situation. Do approach shoplifting situations with caution. Protect your business and protect your employees. That should be your number one priority. That's the do's. The don'ts, the first one's going to be pretty obvious, and that's don't use force or aggressive confrontation strategies. This can easily lead to complex and unwanted legal issues. It's married in, I suppose, with what I said before about acting professionally. So I'm trying to attack this from both sides of the do's and don'ts. Don't seek to keep a suspected shoplifter on site unless you have reasonable grounds to believe that shoplifting is occurring. Makes sense. Don't physically touch the suspect unless it is completely unavoidable and necessary to protect yourself from a bad situation. Accusations of assault or unlawful detention in any other circumstances will almost surely follow, as it does in our profession as well. So protecting yourself from those accusations, it's important. Don't publicly announce an accusation of theft. By that, I mean, if there are other people in the store and you've seen something, shouting out so that everyone can hear a bit that you believe that person has stolen an item is not an ideal way to respond to that situation. I could have come up with 50 do's and don'ts here, maybe a lot more, but I'm very conscious of the time, and I hope I've been able to pick some out that are relevant. And of course, I can answer questions towards the end.
No, that's terrific and very helpful, and we'll endeavour to get some more specific information for different jurisdictions out to members as well. I guess the most important thing is to protect your staff, and also, I guess, from a crime prevention perspective, to set your store up in a way that limits the amount of available areas and so on where people can not be monitored. So moving on to my next question. Unfortunately, abusive customers are a reality in retail, probably more so the last few years than we've seen in the past. How would you recommend staff members or owners handle situations with verbally abusive or aggressive customers? What distinguishes illegal behaviour, I guess, from merely unpleasant behaviour in these scenarios?
Very good questions, and it's an emerging issue for people in retail, law enforcement, health, teaching, etc., etc. We received some very specific Queensland Police training on this issue, but I'm not actually going to refer to that. We work with a lady who's somewhat of a self-defense specialist in their crime prevention field. She's famous. She's been on Sunrise recently. She has some very unique skills, and I've picked up on some things that she's taught in our communities here. They're very simple and very basic and very relatable. Her name is Jerry Kistner. You may have seen her on Sunrise as Ninja Nan. She is the second oldest black belt in the world. And we know that because at the age of 83, she applied to the Guinness Book of Records to find out if she was the oldest black belt in the world. She's not. She's the second. Now, we do some work with her with regards to training, instructing women in domestic violence matters and safety out in the community, etc. There are three things that she often brings up that can help turn a situation, or at least de-escalate a situation that could be going bad, and they relate to posture, eye contact, and unusually manners. So posture is something that we might not view as important, but for an intimidator or an aggressor, it's something that they are looking at very, very closely when they're dealing with you in a retail situation. So if it is possible for a person to intimidate you and be assertive over you and manipulate you in any way, sometimes your posture can give that type of situation away. And what we say to people is, even if you feel intimidated, even if you do feel anxious and uncomfortable, if help is not immediately available, the old saying, fake it till you make it, we have to be aware of our posture. Stand tall, chest out, chin up, shoulders back. And it gives the impression of confidence, and it gives the impression that you're not someone who is intimidated and not someone who will be intimidated. And eye contact also links into this as well. The information that we receive sometimes as police training with regards to eye contact is eye contact, feet, eye contact, feet. And that's an acceptable way to try and keep a situation from escalating. It helps you keep control of yourself if you have a plan for those situations too. Manners, unusual. I know it sounds odd, and I know for some people it might sound like the most out of place word to have in this situation, but with our pleases and thank yous, if we're talking about de-escalating a situation, they contribute to that. And we've actually had lots of discussions with offenders over the years in situations that say in their dealings with police, their dealings with people in authority, that it does help keep a lid on their actions and their activities. It's often easier for older people than it is for younger to do these things. So these are important conversations to have with your younger employees. I've said several times that we're looking to de-escalate a situation, and sometimes that is not always possible through no fault of your own. And if that's the case, I think the next strategy should be in retail. Perhaps I can't de-escalate this person. It's not going in a good place. The next strategy should be that we want to get this person out of the store if possible. And we do that through conversations with police through conversations with our intimidator, using the same rules we have discussed up to this point. If neither are possible, as a suggestion, we've seen this in some stores lately, and it's had a good effect every time it's been used, having a duress audible alarm either underneath the counter for staff, so that they can activate it if a situation is escalating and they know they've lost control, or even on a lanyard that they can have on their, especially if they're a younger person working early hours or late hours, those audible alarms. You know what happens when audible alarms are activated? Almost 99% of the time, offenders will leave rapidly. The difference between unpleasant behaviour and illegal behaviour, I know that unpleasantness, we're talking about maybe someone has a specific complaint about something that they've bought, they're being rude, they're impatient because they're in a queue and they've had to wait, or there's contempt and arrogance, and they're all nasty and unpleasant, but they're not illegal. Sometimes we just have to deal with that. That's the professionalism with working in retail. Illegal behaviour is different. So if the behaviour of a person is erratic and agitated and threatening and unsettling for others and disturbing the peace, I guess in Queensland we do have a specific offence for that if it's in a public place, and we refer to it as a public nuisance offence. But there are also scenarios that are more serious, where a threat to assault another person, even if the assault does not occur, here in Queensland, sometimes you can still be found guilty of an actual assault. It's referred to a common assault. And the best way I could describe how that works is if someone's standing on one side of the service desk and they pick up a stapler in a fit of rage and say to the employee, I'm going to hit you in the head with this stapler, and they're close and the stapler's raised in their hands and the employee believes they're going to be hit, but
Yep.
they're not, the offence is still committed. If the victim believes after a threat that an offence is going to occur, an assault is going to occur in the way that the threat is said, that's an assault in Queensland. So regardless of whether the assault actually occurs or not.
Okay. Wow, there's some amazing insights in that section there, Steve. I really appreciate it. I might move on to the next question now, if that's okay. There's been a bit of a trend of retailers posting photos of alleged shoplifters on social media or behind, putting pictures behind the counter for staff. Is this legal? Can you clarify what actions retailers can and cannot take when it comes to identifying and banning suspected shoplifters?
I know what you're talking about. We see it locally here as well. There's one grocery store I know that has what they refer to as a wall of shame with lots of images taken from CCTVs on site. There's a chemist I know, not 5-minute walk from here, that's very famous for posting CCTV images on their social media site. In general, it is not advisable to do this. The risk of civil action being taken against a business for breaching privacy laws and potential defamation claims is real, and it's not one that you should treat lightly. However, it could be at times interpreted as reasonable on your part if you have a CCTV system in place to make it known that that system is there present to deter or detect shoplifting and share those images with law enforcement. And that is entirely acceptable. Here in Queensland, we actually have every police district in the state has what they refer to as a My Police site. So every region is made up of a certain number of districts. Every district has one of these websites allocated to them. And when CCTV images linked to reported crimes are available, police through this website, we can share this image online and members of the public can view it. And there is a legally approved wording that's attached to it that actually states that the person in the image may be someone we want to speak to in relation to a reported crime, or they may even, in fact, just be a witness to an incident that we think they could help. Members of the public can, members of the public can interact with that, give information, and businesses, individuals can embed a link from that site onto an online social media platform or a business website, meaning that they are borrowing our CCTV scroll for that district and are displaying exactly what we are displaying. It's being shared. Yep. So any changes that we make to the CCTV scrolls, removing an image, immediately that change is shared to your scroll, and that is safe. You can also individually print off images from that site and actually put them on display with a QPS badge and the wording that's been approved by our solicitors and display it within your store. And I would suggest that that's probably a better option than actually displaying your own CCTV images or so forth online or on a wall of shame scenario.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. The other one I was going to ask you about sort of CCTV, I mean, most stores use it, and some of the available technology now has things like facial recognition. Considered to be sort of best practice for using those technologies effectively and legally in a retail crime prevention sense?
Tricky. It's a very tricky scenario, and although I haven't seen it in Mackay and retail stores, I'm aware that in places like international airports, domestic airports, places like that, they're becoming far more common. Anyone who uses that type of technology must ensure that they are compliant with the Privacy Act 1988, which is actually Commonwealth legislation. And if you're also a resident of Queensland or a business in Queensland, you must be compliant with the Information Privacy Act from 2009. This laws in those acts relate to the collection, storage, and the use of personal information. legal advice before establishing a CCTV system or surveillance system that has facial recognition technology would be necessary, in my opinion, to ensure compliance with those acts before using them in any situation.
You have to treat it very carefully.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot more to that type of technology as well, to do with ethical situations, transparency, making sure there's sufficient signage so that people who are in that area that are being recorded actually know that that type of technology is in place and happening. Staff training, of course, would be a big issue, and the implications for IT security and protecting that data, which contains identifying information of other people, is mandatory. It's not something that can be avoided. You're actually required in those circumstances to show due diligence to protect that information.
Yeah, okay, so a very hard area for a small business really to manage. So I think that's very cautionary advice. The next question I had was about break-ins and robberies. Obviously, they're less common than, shoplifting, but they're obviously a significant concern for retailers, particularly retailers who are on high streets and, in rural areas. Can you walk us through the proper procedures for handling those situations, both during and after an incident?
Yeah, I sure can. Let's look at the scenario of you arriving to work early at the beginning of the day and you become aware that a break has occurred, which if you're a business owner or a manager, you're the one opening the doors, and that's not an uncommon situation. There's shattered glass to the front glass panel, or an obvious point of entry that you can see. The first thing that you should be thinking, that we would recommend you be thinking, is the intruder still on site? This is a safety issue, obviously. If the answer is yes, or you're unsure, contact police or security first. And I wouldn't be entering the business until they arrived, and check the premises for you to make sure that there in fact was no one still inside. And the best contact method for that situation is not, and we're going to be talking about police contact methods later, but I would recommend 000.
Okay.
You don't risk entry unless you are satisfied it's safe to do so. Most break-ins are solved as a result of the collection of forensic evidence or CCTV footage. For example, it could be shoe prints on tiles, blood on the floor, blood on windows from smashed glass, fingerprints, DNA touch points, discarded drink tins, smokes left on the ground, etc., etc. Where possible, do not interact with any of those items and leave them untouched. That is not always possible, because for the business to operate, for staff or customers to enter or leave, you will have to clean to ensure their safety. Do what's necessary to allow that to happen, and if possible, otherwise leave everything as it is. If you do need to move things for that purpose, I would also recommend taking a photograph before you touched or moved anything. Most of us have a mobile phone. If you take it from a reasonably close standpoint or viewpoint, that would be helpful, so that at least you can show investigators what it looked like before the items were moved. Only move what is needed. Signage might be needed. We often see people will just literally write a note on a handwritten piece of paper that a break-in has happened and that entry in certain areas is restricted, so that again, staff and customers are aware. Inspect your CCTV recordings. Is footage still available? Is it possible that it could assist investigators? You mentioned the word robbery earlier, and I saw it in one of our earlier documents. I just want to confirm with everyone what the term robbery might mean in the community and what it means to us. For us, the term robbery is in fact related to very high priority crime. Robberies can be armed robberies, robberies with violence, robberies in company with other people involving multiple. It's the theft of an item accompanied by violence normally, or at least accompanied by the threat of violence. And our advice, if we are going to give any advice to business owners, managers, employees, etc., is very simple, and that's if you are ever unfortunate enough to find yourself in that type of situation, which is possible with news agencies, etc., opening early, as many do, and sometimes with one person being present only, that's comply with whatever is asked and do what you need to do to ensure your own safety. Once the situation has ended, obviously it's a case where we would immediately be seeking to contact police, contact your manager, contact shopping complex managers, security, whoever needs to be, ambulance, etc. I'm going to bounce back here. I've missed something that's really important. It's something I've only seen recently, and it's a suggestion for protecting your business from a break-in. Does that fit into this category, or is that something that...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we should cover that.
Okay. So aside from what is known with lighting, audible alarms, CCTV, locks, everything under lock and key, I saw something recently with a business here in Mackay that was targeted twice in a month with vehicle ramming, and it was a tobacconist. And so the vehicle would drive through the front windows, exit the car, steal what they wanted very rapidly, and then leave in the car. So bollards were implemented, but the business owner installed something that I can only describe it as an option which impedes the vision of your offender. There might be some people who are listening in who have seen this. So once glass is damaged or movement is detected, there are devices that release thick smoke rapidly, which is non-toxic. And I've seen these devices activate. They're extremely effective in reducing the vision of anyone who may be inside of the business at that time. So they may have been fortunate enough to gain entry, but if they are inside of the business, once these smoke release systems are activated, you cannot see the hand in front of your face.
Wow.
They're essentially immobilized for as long as it takes for that smoke to dissipate. It's non-toxic. I've seen it in businesses that have food, have items with paper products, have tobacco products, etc., etc. And the businesses that have had it installed, once the offenders know it's there, there's no more repeat victimization. Instead, it hasn't happened. They've proven to be effective.
Yeah, wow. That's really, really interesting. Thank you for that insight. I'm just mindful of the time. Just a reminder, if anybody's got any questions, please put them in the Q&A section before we'll get to them at the end. Steve, if you're happy to keep going, I'd love to still get through the rest of the questions that we had prepared, if that's okay. And I'll understand if any of the members that are listening need to go, that's absolutely fine, and we'll have the recording of this available in our EDM. But please stay on if you can, because I think we've got some other really important questions to ask Steve. So moving on, and you touched on tobacco products. Obviously, they're a high-value regulated item, and that can make businesses more attractive targets of criminal break-ins. And you've touched on that aspect of crime prevention with like the smoke deterrent, which is, I think, a really fascinating one. Are there any other suggestions you've got to limit members' exposure and to protect those products?
I've seen businesses do all that they can afford to in almost every instance. And so they're securing, especially tobacco products, they're having special lockable containers, safes, etc. On site. And despite that, many of our offenders are coming in, because of that, many of our offenders are coming in with tools and whatever is needed. They think they'll need to try and access or gain access to tobacco products. They're becoming obviously more common. Those types of offences are becoming more common here as well. Obviously, with those tools, that they're prepared to accept the risk that it's going to take time for them to access what they need to access. So I think something that really aggravates their acceptance of that risk is things like audible alarms. They know if an audible alarm is activated, there's a very good chance that there could be a security company or a police car pulling in at the front within a matter of minutes, if not a resident in the area responding and trying to get some understanding of what is happening. And when that's the case, they have to make an on-the-spot decision. Are we going to stay here regardless and try and access this with our tools? Or are we going to, they just refuse to accept that risk and they'll leave. CCTV units, audible alarms, good lighting. I would love to say that businesses who can afford it should consider the purchase of special glass, which if you're not familiar, it's not conventional glass, which could be smashed. I had a crowbar in my hand and went to smash ordinary glass. It would shatter eventually.
Yeah.
In fact, it wouldn't take long for me to gain an entry point. Special glass does not handle that way. It could take 3, 4, 5 times as long to gain an entry point, and it doesn't shatter the way normal glass does either. It's small damage, small amounts of damage. It's much more difficult, but before anyone jots it down and says, that's us, that's what we need to purchase, you need to be aware that there is a cost factor with special glass. It's significantly more expensive than standard glass could be.
Okay.
I think coupled with,
sorry.
No, I was just going to mention, coupled with that that smoke activation system that I've seen, which has proven very effective. I think most businesses are doing all that they can.
Terrific. And just in this space, obviously we've recently had the introduction of licensing for tobacco in Queensland. We've also had new legislation regarding illicit trade in tobacco and vapes. I was interested to know, what's the proper procedure for reporting any suspicious activity they might observe? So if they notice, a pop-up gift shop down the road that seems to be selling these products illegally, what should they do?
Well, I know certainly know what the police contact methods are in Queensland, but I can't speak for other states, but that would be similar. So if something is happening now and you can see it, regardless of whether it's an emergency situation or not, if it's happening now, that's become one of the qualifying points for using 000 to contact police. I know most of us have grown up with the education and awareness that you use 000 in emergencies. That hasn't changed. This is in addition to. So if something is happening now, you might not believe it to be a life-threatening scenario, but it's happening now. You can see it, that it's also a 000 situation, and you can utilize it. I mean, the worst that can happen is the 000 call taker will forward the details to police another way. Okay. So I don't think people should fear that, because if they feel that their call might not be qualifying for a 000, it's not like anything can happen against them. You're not deliberately misusing the service. In Queensland as well, we have something that's called Police Link, which is a non-urgent reporting method. So 131 444 is the contact number for any non-urgent situation, regardless of what it might be. In addition to the contact number, you can also utilise Police Link in an online way through your mobile phone, through the Queensland Police Service website.
Okay.
Station phone numbers are a little different. That situation has certainly changed here, and I'm not sure everyone in our community is aware of this, but ringing your station phone number as a method to contact police about anything and everything always is not an option on the table anymore. Okay. We're trying to free up officers from being seated in police stations and answering phone calls and trying to get them out in police cars. And that's why 000s and Police Link were pushed as the preferred option. But of course, if you need to give a statement or make an appointment to see an individual officer at the station, and then your station contact number is the one to use.
Terrific. And now staff training's a really crucial thing to crime prevention. What key elements should be included in a comprehensive staff training program for retail crime prevention?
I think it would be teaching, and this might not sound immediately relevant, but teaching your employees the impact of theft, especially on small businesses, is essential, and it should be something that you would lead with to give some context for everything that comes after that point. And then talking about why loss prevention or crime prevention is necessary. Talking about the types of theft that can occur inside of a store, and by that we could be talking about the customer theft, or even being aware that sometimes our fellow colleagues may be involved in theft from the business as well, and the offending methods that are utilised. When we spoke about that at the beginning of the talk today, things to be aware of, things that they should be alert to. Rather than one loss prevention officer or making one employee the loss prevention officer for a retail business, I think it's so much more beneficial for a business to have everyone on board and everyone accept that responsibility and be aware that it is one of the responsibilities every shift, every minute. Teach all staff to be loss prevention officers and to be alert to suspicious activity, exactly how they should respond to a scenario if one does play out, as we've spoken about earlier, who to ring, what to do, what to say, where to record, who to report to, all of those scenarios. And I've touched on this, and I'm going to give you a very brief story on why I'm raising it. And that's that we need to be aware of what's happening in our store, but we certainly should be equally aware of what's happening around it in the near vicinity. It wasn't that long ago that we had a job on a night shift where there was a staff member, a young female, working alone at a service station at about 1 a.m, and she noticed that there was a person sitting and trying to hide behind a tree who was apparently looking at her and watching her activities within the store. It unsettled her. She didn't feel safe, so she rang police. We parked some distance away and walked and approached the scene, and she was 100% correct. She was certainly being watched and monitored, and etc. We approached the gentleman in question and were able to speak with him safely, and as it panned out, he was in the middle of psyching himself up to commit an armed robbery within the store, that store. And he had a knife available at his hand to do it, and he was in some conflict and some turmoil about what he should do, whether he should or shouldn't, but he was in that psych-up phase to allow him to progress. So it's important to know what's happening around your store when possible too, and that's why I bring that up.
No, that's a great example to be really vigilant about what's happening outside your store. But as you said before, for newsagents, lottery retailers, probably more early in the mornings, but you know, you can still have people that are acting or behaving erratically at those times as well. So it's a great suggestion. And my very last question, I know we've gone over, but there's been some really great content to get through. Looking ahead, are there any emerging trends in retail crime that our members should be aware of, and how can they best prepare for those potential threats?
There's probably three that have our attention more than most. And the first one I'm going to raise doesn't impact me here in Mackay because I don't live in a major city, and that's where this is occurring. It's referred to as ORC, O-R-C, which is organised retail crime. Typically in the larger cities, it's an international trend, not just something happening here in Australia, where large groups of offenders coordinate and plan their efforts to target individual businesses for high value items, for example, maybe jewellery or electronics or vehicles, with the goal of on-selling them for profit. It wouldn't surprise me if everyone tuned in today has not seen those type of large-scale smash and grab activities in jewellers that we see on the news here in Australia or even overseas. They're becoming more common. The second one, I think this might catch some people off guard, but I certainly need to raise it, and that's the cybercrime element. So large organisations are in a position to budget for IT protection from cybercrime. They'll have their own cybercrime units, all qualified, whatever they need for resources at their disposal. Most small and mid-sized businesses don't have the budgets or don't have the ability to offer, that same type of protection for their business. But data breaches, hacking, fraud, they're becoming more prominent. And businesses in Queensland, every business that holds identifying information, whether it's about their staff or their customers, has a mandatory responsibility to protect it. So, and we're expected to be able to show if something happens, something nasty in this world, whether we're a corner store or a major mining company, we have to be able to show that we took due diligence to protect that data. It's worthwhile investment for anyone in a small to mid-sized business to partner up with a local IT security business who gives you advice on what you should and should not be doing. Finally,
That's a really interesting insight again. We do a lot of education for members around the Cyber Wardens program, which you probably just see over my shoulder there. That's a federal government funded program with Council of Small Business Organisations, and it's a training program. So that's freely available to small businesses with a real small business focus. And it's effective in the sense that at least it demonstrates that the business is taking it seriously and that they have, trained themselves and trained their staff to be cyber wardens. But I think your suggestion also of partnering with a local business is a really good one, and it just offers members that level of protection that, not so much just to be able to prove that they've done the right thing if something goes wrong, but obviously we are here talking about crime prevention. It's really about understanding how you can prevent these things from happening in the first place.
The final trend I can bring up for your listeners, and I think I've said this 3 times already, it's happening in many industries, and that's dealing with people who are deliberately showing increased aggression and hostility. So more people are showing a propensity for aggression or actual violence when confronted by an employee in a retail situation, when the employee is responding to suspected stealing or suspicious behaviour. The need for training on response and reporting options for this, I think, are more important than ever. And if we ignore it in one of these situations and mishandled, it brings that opportunity for flipping, I think, a situation where a person is recognised initially as a victim, potentially also becoming an offender from a situation which we just don't like seeing.
No, that's really, really helpful. It's really good to get those insights on some of those emerging trends, and really like to thank you, Steve, for all of the insights you provided today. I don't think we've got any questions, and so we've already gone a fair way over time, so I don't want to take up more of your time.
Apologise for that.
Oh, no. There's some terrific stuff to get through, and your expertise is, incredibly valuable, and, the insights have undoubtedly helped our members with being able to go out and consider how they can make safer business environments for them and their staff. So really appreciate that. We just want to remind members from outside Queensland to consult your local authorities or get specific legal advice pertaining to your jurisdiction. Obviously, we've been talking very much from a Queensland legal perspective throughout this webinar, but it does also provide us with a solid foundation for addressing crime prevention across Australia. So we really appreciate your time again, Acting Sergeant Smith, for joining us today, and all of the members who've joined us as well. It's been a really helpful session. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.